So we got the Pac-12 up next. And what do we make of the Pac-12 conference? Well, I mean, I'll say this. I've been on a couple podcasts and said this because I think it's important that we all are on the same page going into college football season. There's going to be a lot of really good football games played that are kicked off right around 10 Eastern time, p.m. Okay? So all of us together, what we need to do, go to your local CVS, maybe your local Publix, Kroger. On the West Coast, I know Major Market and Albertsons. Those are big venues that you go to get your groceries. Wherever you go, I want you to stock up on Red Bull. I want you to stock up on Monster Energy, Reign Energy. I enjoy caffeine pills. Probably another show for another time, but that's how I get my caffeine intake because there's a lot of games we need to make sure that we stay up for during our college football Saturday that have a lot of Pac-12 teams involved. Like I could be convinced of like 4 or 5 teams being a conference champion when it comes to the Pac-12 conference. I mean, Utah, they're back-to-back conference champs. I worry a little bit about what Cam Rising is going to bring to the table. Like I hope he's healthy. I hope he's ready to go and that doesn't, impact the way that he looks the rest of the season. The defense last year gave me some pause at times. There were a couple of games where they didn't look like they played really well when teams attacked the perimeter against them. The game against UCLA comes to mind. You beat USC twice, but there were a couple of times against USC where you're like, hey, man, those playmakers are hurting them. So I'm worried about Utah. Also going 3 in a row is just very, very difficult. I mean, Washington, they may have the best passing game in all of America. No way around it. They may have the best pass game in college football with Michael Penix Jr., but that defense, man, that secondary, they allowed 268 pass yards a game. That's tough to do in a conference where you have a Caleb Williams, where you have a Bo Nix, where you have a Cam Rising. Like that's a tough formula to work with. Oregon State, I mean, they are everybody's dark horse. And if they're everybody's dark horse, are they really a dark horse? Like that's kind of the question I want us to ask. I'm really waiting to see what DJ Uiagalelei does for them. That narrative with what he did at Clemson could change very quickly if he goes out there and starts balling. I mean, Oregon State, I think they are kind of like a Utah Junior in some ways. You know what you're getting with them. You know they're going to be physical in the line of scrimmage. You know they're going to play tough defense. I wonder what DJU is for them from an impact standpoint. So they're everybody's dark horse pick, but I mean, I think the obvious for me, like USC is going to be in this game where I would be wildly surprised. As we sit here in August, I'm picking USC to be in this Pac-12 title game yet again. With what they did on defense in the portal, the way that they improved the offensive line, I guess, also benefited, but the defensive line specifically, Bear Alexander, transfer from Georgia. Anthony Lucas, transfer from Texas A&M. Jack Sullivan, transfer from Purdue. Where are these cats transferring from? SEC and Big Ten schools. Lincoln Riley understands for us to compete what we want to compete for, which is national titles and college football playoffs, and what we did last year against Utah, the way that we didn't look like, we got to get better personnel. So they go where they have the big people in those conferences, and they bring them to LA, and good for them. Caleb Williams is back for another go-around, man. Like, you know how we feel about him. Last year, he was just carrying USC. This season, I think he'll have a little bit more help defensively, but even so, man, like, they have 75% of the production back from last year's offense. And last year going into this season with all the transfers they had in Lincoln Riley's first year and like Caleb Williams and all that they could be, like there was a lot of optimism. And you heard a lot of like talking coming out of the USC circle of what USC was going to be and how good they could be. But like this coming season in camp right now in the USC circle, it's pretty quiet. And not in the sense that there's not headlines, there's not excitement. It's pretty quiet in the sense that they are confident. Like they don't have to talk about what they're going to do anymore. USC is built for this now. It's a confidence thing. And Caleb Williams, as long as he is the quarterback for USC, as long as he stays healthy, they're going to have a very real shot in the Pac-12 conference, very real shot at the Pac-12 title. They were good enough to make it to this game last year. They improved on defense, and with what they bring back, I don't see a reason why they won't be back in this game this coming season. Now, who do they meet there? The Oregon Ducks. The Oregon Ducks with old Bo Nix and Dan Lanning and all that Nike money and uniforms they have. Like Oregon now, I am excited to watch this team. If y'all have watched this show for any length of time, I am enormously high on what Dan Lanning is doing there. He came on this show, and he's probably one of my favorite interviews we got a chance to do. Dude is all business. Dude is all football. And Bo Nix is really like the straw that stirs this drink. We understand that. And there's a lot made about what happened last year, and oh man, Bo Nix finally kind of made good on what we thought he could be, and now he brings in a new OC. Kenny Dillingham goes and takes the head job at Arizona State. Good for him. But there's question marks around Bo Nix with this new offensive coordinator, Willie Stein, coming from UTSA. And I will say this, man. I think what we saw last year was the real Bo Nix. And last year was big for Bo Nix to be able to prove that to everybody else in the country, of course. But there is something to be said for the journey Bo Nix has had and the way that he has built to a year like last year and the fresh start he got to have. Because I don't know that we talk about this enough. Bo Nix grew up in front of our eyes. And there is such a thing as playing too early. Was Bo Nix ready to play that first game of his career against Oregon? I don't know. You'll have to ask Bo Nix, but it sure looked like it by the way that he performed. But even so, that is such a tough spot to step into with his legacy at Auburn. His dad played at Auburn, all the pressure on him to be the guy to bring Auburn back and what he was as a recruit. Like, it was I would imagine like a pretty loud circle to be in any time that you had bad Bo show up. And so for him to get a fresh start, to be in a new place, to be far from what he's known, to play for a coach like Dan Lanning, and to have the success he had last year. I mean, he was a Heisman candidate last year in my mind. I think that does wonders for his confidence. And so I think he will kind of pick up where he left off last year. I think there is likely a internal assuredness about him, and I think that radiates throughout this team. Defensively, that's probably where your question lies. Like, they had issues last year in the secondary. No way around it. That's why they held that L to Washington at the end of last year. Did a lot in the portal, added 4 new defensive backs, made a huge pickup on the defensive line, getting edge defender Jordan Birch. He was a 5-star plus player out of high school, played at South Carolina last year. Like, he's going to be, I think, a problem for the rest of the Pac-12. They were very excited to get him, I promise you. So I think Dan Lanning and Bo Nix are a reason for a lot of belief right now. I think Dan Lanning has this team believing. And so I think Oregon absolutely ends up in this Pac-12 title game. But when it comes down to it, man, I think USC is just on a mission right now. Like, I think they're on a mission. I think Caleb Williams, you saw a lot in that Johnny Manziel documentary, and I personally couldn't help but draw the comparison from the circus that was around Johnny Manziel at that point in time to the circus that's around Caleb Williams right now. Now, obviously, 2 different players, 2 different people, but I think for Caleb Williams, the circus and the excitement and the hype and all that, I think he kind of welcomes that right now. And I think he is staying locked in on what the ultimate goal is by the way that he talks about his desire to play for the college football playoff. Like, I think obviously doing that, getting there, would be winning the Pac-12 title to start. The way that he's so laser focused and the way that Lincoln Riley is, I think, capitalizing on all of the noise around USC and what they didn't do at the end of last year, I think that they're the edge. And I think that when it comes to the defensive side of things, they do enough to take Caleb Williams from being like the equalizer. Defense, you weren't good enough last year. Caleb Williams, let's keep us in the game. They do enough to make him the edge. I'm not saying that they end up being like the best defense in the country. I'm saying that they improve enough to allow Caleb Williams to take advantage of him being like the best player in college football week in and week out. So for me, I have USC winning the Pac-12 conference.
Hey y'all, thanks so much for watching. Subscribe to the channel here to make sure you don't miss an episode of The Hard Count. Also be sure to check out other videos on the On3 YouTube channel.